greatest companies of our generation, and I think there's a lot of excitement about them being here today, but this excitement is going to go on and on and on and on, because I've no doubt they have massive plans and huge innovations that are still coming to market. It's my absolute pleasure, please, a very warm welcome for Vice President and CTO of Amazon.com and Head of AWS, Werner Vogels.
Hello.
Lovely to see you. Thank you. Okay. No problem. Werner, how is that? They're a little bit small, but you know, they're kind of comfy.
Wobbly as
It's a little bit steady. You can hang
Good.
on to me. Thank you so much for being here. It's
My
an
pleasure.
absolute luxury to have you. We're so excited to understand a little bit about the inside world of AWS and the impact that it's made. And we're thrilled to have you with you to understand a little bit more about how you're thinking about the world of cloud computing and the future of technology as we see it. To kick off, can I ask you to, well, I guess, start at the beginning, right? Amazon is, I mean, we all know today it's e-commerce company, right? Revolutionized how we're buying books. But how did we get where we are today? How did AWS emerge? Where did the vision come from? Is this something that you had in the back of your mind maybe many years ago when you were a research in distributed computing?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to realize that Amazon is a technology company. I mean, we just happen to do retail. If you think about how Jeff started Amazon, it was not because he wanted to start a bookshop. He was fascinated by the internet. This is 1994. I mean, this is early days. E-commerce doesn't exist yet. And so he's fascinated by the internet because, and he just picked books as an example. A really good bookshop has 40,000 titles in stock, yet there's millions of books out there. And actually the only place where you could really sell, let's say, all the books in the world will be online. And so that was sort of what drove the inception of Amazon.com. But everything that we've done there has been technology, whether that is reviews or whether it's recommendations or all the things that we've been doing at Amazon is actually technology under the covers. Yeah? And without that, we would never have been able to scale to where we are. Now, with respect to AWS, there's a bit of history there. In early 2000, what we had done is we had opened up the catalog, so that's the catalog with all the products in it. Put an API on it that was popular in those days to see what kind of innovation would happen, what kind of businesses would start using the API. And it was really successful. Lots of new companies were being built. They did comparison shopping, new interfaces to e-commerce, things like that. But as soon as these companies started to become successful, they all started to stutter in their execution. Why? Because they needed to get investment. They needed to start buying servers, they needed to hire IT people, and as such, most of those companies eventually failed. Because they were not, that was not their
From
expertise.
their own success.
Internally at Amazon, we were organized as many very small teams, almost like small startups. That each have their own, let's say, roadmap, their own innovation, and we had built technology for them to sort of, so that they could focus on innovation and not on all the boring stuff that you need to do as a technologist. So we looked at these companies that were failing and said, oh wait, but we've solved this for ourselves. Maybe we can start taking these technologies and bring them to the outside world in the hope that, so that's what we would call in those days internet scale companies, that they could become successful as well. And so in 2006 we launched the first one, S3, which is storage service, the compute service in the fall of that year, and it's been extremely successful. So the idea that this was sort of Amazon just selling off excess capacity was never the case. Yeah, it really was intended as a business by itself. And often when Amazon does sort of innovation, we really like to think about doing really big, bold bets. So yeah, you do this massive investment in this particular product, in this case AWS, and if it is going to be successful, it's going to be hugely successful. Yeah, and will have a significant impact on the balance sheet of the company.
Yeah.
And we've seen that over time. You know, we've seen these bets being successful with the Kindle, for example, or with fulfillment by Amazon, or these days with the Alexa voice service, for example. These bold bets really if they are successful, they're hugely successful.
Sure, that's incredible, and it's incredible to see the growth. I mean, if you're talking about day one, it sounds like you were building for scale, right? So even if you were considering a bookstore, well, how would you have every book in the world available, you know, and powered by the technology under that? And also scaling, I guess, through the success of your customers. It's incredible to see, like, wait, if our customers are stuttering, it's going to stunt our growth, so let's help them to grow faster. Now, it's incredible how you guys are thinking about scale early on and from day one. Is that how AWS has grown so quickly? Can you give us an idea of the size and the opportunity of the company now, the types of services it's offering?
Well, first of all, I think we are, 10 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to predict where we are today. I mean, it's clearly that we really hit a nerve in how companies are being built and how companies want to use IT. So on one hand, this is amazing technology, and as a CTO, of course, I'm in love with that. But I think what was the major change driver was that we also put a radical different business model against it. Yeah, so as the CTO of Amazon, let's say not of AWS, I always hated dealing with vendors because I always felt that they were in charge. The only way to drive your costs down was to make very long-term contracts and to pay massive amounts of money upfront. And so, and once you had paid that money, they didn't really care anymore. And so if you want to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, which is easy to see how you do that in retail, we also wanted to apply the same principles to AWS. How do you become the Earth's most customer-centric IT provider? By basically giving control over to your customers, so that they're in control. Yeah, so they no longer need to pay upfront, they only need to pay afterwards. Yeah, you can shift CapEx to OpEx. You can make sure also that by using elasticity, that it's not just a shifting of money, it's actually having to pay less. Yep. And taking away all the heavy lifting and other pieces that make companies not differentiated. And I think one of the success factors there is on one hand the business model, but also the fact that everybody starts to realize that there's a certain level of IT that does not make you competitive. Everybody has to do it. There's a great paper many years ago by Nick Carr in Harvard Business Review that's called IT Doesn't Matter. He didn't mean that IT doesn't matter, but there is a certain level of IT that everybody else has to do. And as such, you know, it doesn't make you, any investment in there doesn't make you more competitive. And what we've seen, of course, is that on one hand, a massive take-up in the world of startups. Yeah, I mean, if you talk to the Airbnbs, the Ubers, the Dropboxes of this world, they will tell you without cloud computing, they would never have been able to get off the ground. Yeah, Pinterest, Slack, all these companies have been built on that. But it didn't take too long before enterprises figured out that this was way too good a deal for them as well. And we see massive moves over from enterprises into the cloud, and whether that is General Electric that will close 30 of the 34 data centers and move things over to AWS. And we see massive moves over here. But look, for example, here in Spain, for example, in financial services, Bank Inter, BBVA, yep. Open Bank, but also the younger startups. I mean, we heard this morning about Wallapop, yeah. And for example, there's a very interesting company called Malaria Spotter that uses gamifications to count malaria cells. Right. And so here in Spain, and so yeah. there's amazing innovations happening across the board, or already young businesses here that became successul, like Fon and like hotel beds, that all yeah. have grown up on the cloud.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so it's across the board. I also think there's an interesting report from Harvard Business School on the impact on the VC community. Yeah, where, I mean, 10 years ago, before cloud computing, the kind of investments that you guys were making were larger investments, because companies yep. needed a lot more money to get started, with high risk yeah. associated with it. But these days, there's a clear different approach with much more, what I would say, maybe it doesn't sound as well, but spray and pray, yeah. where the investments are much smaller.
Cheaper.
Many more companies can get investments today than say 10 years ago. Yep. And as it's the rise of the startup community is also driven by the fact that VCs now have much more capabilities to actually support more companies.
Yeah, and you can get a lot further on that VC dollar, right? Exactly, given the infrastructure. I mean, it's incredible. So you're kind of replacing internal IT departments and that kind of capex expenditure that companies need. So I guess it's super attractive to be able to access the technology seamlessly, in a flexible manner, and that's most likely far cheaper and actually probably better performance maybe than what we've had to drive this change. But what I'd love to understand is maybe diving into a little bit deeper about your guys' innovation process. You said you guys work on very entrepreneurial small teams within the company, and AWS breeds innovation, and it's incredible to even keep up with the amount of product launch and different services that are there. Where does this agility come from, and these ideas and the creativity in terms of how you're building out products and services?
I think this, of course, has its roots in Amazon.com itself. We have a strong belief, for example, in the e-commerce world, that if we would stop innovating, Amazon will be out of business in 10 to 15 years. And not because there will be other large e-commerce companies stepping up, but there will be death by 1,000 cuts. You know, someone will be doing diapers better, someone will be doing shoes better. And as such, the company is still moving really fast in terms of in innovation, because it's our lifeblood. It's something that you see coming back with most other companies that will now want to go through, let's say, digital transformation phase for the same reason. Financial services companies want to become more digital because they realize that they're under threat from a lot of young startups that, for example, do international money transfer better, like companies like TransferWise or Coins.ph that are all serving very small parts of the financial services community much better. So the same goes for Amazon. So we need to still continue to move fast. So we have a whole set of processes around it. If you go back to the letter to shareholders from '97 that Jeff wrote when they went for IPO, he lays out the principles of the company. The first one is, of course, a very well-known one. It is sort of like, we're in this for the long term. If you're a short-term investor, do not invest in Amazon. The second line, however, is we will continuously experiment, measure relentlessly, and learn from that. And you know, the cost of failure should drive down such that we can do many of these experiments. And these experiments, you know, things are not an experiment if you really know what the outcome is. So we have a whole set of principles around how to do these experiments, how to move fast, how to have small teams that actually are all owning their own innovation agenda. Now for AWS, that works a little bit different. So if you're an e-commerce operation, you do this for your customers, you can experiment easily towards your customers. In AWS, it's a different world because other people build their business on you. So doing these experiments or building these new services comes with great responsibility because you're responsible almost for the business that others are running on you. So the processes there run slightly different. What we do there is when we launch a new service, we often launch it with a minimum feature set and then allow our customers to drive the roadmap of features that they feel should be added to the service. For example, when we launched DynamoDB, our non-relational database, we already knew that customers wanted secondary indices, but we didn't launch with them. We launched them with a smaller feature set and then let customers decide exactly which features they wanted to see added first. Important in all of this is that your customer is in the loop of the development of these services, of these features. Last year, we launched well over 1,000 new major features and services. Yeah, and so, we have now 90 major services in AWS, and each of them is in contact with their most important customer group and allow them to drive the roadmap and also change the roadmap if that's necessary. We also, I think what sets us aside from some of the other technology players in the cloud world is that something what Amazon, although we're really good at the technology side, I think what sets us apart from that is that we're really good in customer-centric product thinking. So, for example, when we start defining a new product or a new feature, we have a process called working from the customer backwards. What you do, the first thing you do is write a press release. That seems silly, there's not a press release that will go out. But in the press release, you write in very clear and simple terms exactly what you're going to build. Then you write the 10 or 20 FAQ questions, the frequently asked questions. Again, you have to answer them in very clear and simple terms. And often we iterate on that 10 or 15 times before we really have that clear exactly what we want to do. Then you write a document about how are my customers going to use this, your UX document, and then parts of the user manual. So after that, you have a set of 4 documents that clearly describe exactly what you're going to build from a product perspective. Yeah, and as such, I think one part of the great success of AWS is that we build really good products. that customers know how to use. And the days of where AWS was only, let's say, compute, storage, and databases are long gone. You know, this is, everything circles around, for example, analytics, data warehousing, ad hoc analytics, IoT, mobile development, across the board, there's all these services that customers can use. And so it's not just the fact that you can get cheap capacity, it is that there's all these higher level services that you can now integrate into your applications that you don't have to think about anymore.
Yep.
Every website, every application has search integrated into it. You need to, yeah, because customers need to be, it's not a competitive differentiator, it's just something you have to do. If you don't have it, yeah, that's nasty. Before that, before cloud search and Elasticsearch were available for customers as services, everybody needed to run Solar and Lucene. And that was a nightmare to make those scalable. And as such, you had to invest people and technology into something that did not make you more competitive.
Yeah.
Now you can just grab one service
Sure.
and do it for you. You no longer have to think
And
about
you're
it.
giving them more flexibility. I mean, they can test and try things. You're leveraging up their brain power and manpower now to focus on their core business.
And you can easily make mistakes. In the past, in the world of real hardware, if you had bought hardware, you were stuck with it. Yeah, if you made a mistake and think, hey, maybe I am more CPU bound and memory bound, turns out that's not the case. In the case of AWS, you just click a button.
Yep.
Or, you know, with 16 regions around the world and 6 more announced, customers can, with one click of a button, launch in Australia. Look at quite a few of the startups here in Spain, for example. They're not only targeting the Spanish market, they're targeting a global market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that makes cloud computing makes that you no longer need to do these long negotiations with data centers in Japan to get started.
Yeah.
Just a click of a button.
Well, that's what's incredible with AWS, because not only is it now facilitating maybe the larger enterprise do their transition into cloud and their digital transformation, but exactly that, it's now almost the fuel of the fire, right, of the startup revolution. We're advocates of that, right? The talent comes from everywhere and you can build global businesses now any part of the world. Why not Madrid, right? So it's amazing to see how you guys have kind of, it's like a perfect storm really in terms of timing and how this, you know, technology's been made available, and then how you guys have managed to position yourselves as allies and friends and partners with your customers, many of whom are startups. Now, did you think about that, you know, strategically? Was it more reactive because these companies were looking for cheaper, faster way to build things? How are you specifically working with the startup community in terms of engaging with them, and do they help in this innovative process about defining the future service roadmap for you guys?
Well, we've never seen ourselves as vendors. We've always seen ourselves in partners, where almost we are investing in these companies, helping them become successful. Trying to drive their costs down, for example. We have a whole set of programs where we help them from a technology point of view to find the right architecture, such that they can really keep their cost under control. For us, there is no win in actually squeezing an extra dollar out of a customer. Really, you rather have them actually reduce costs. We have reduced our pricing, what is it, 62 times now, I believe. Yeah,
nice.
And so without any competitive pressure, mostly because as our scale grows, our own cost basis goes down, and we do innovations in our data centers, and then we can give that money back to our customers. So, but also, for example, we continuously give our customers advice, often through automated tools such as something called Trusted Advisor, that they can run on their infrastructure, and says, oh, those are the 5 places where you can still save money. And so, working with startups continuously to really make sure that they spend as little as possible with us, but have a high rate of success, means that down the line, we'll be fine. If they're successful, we'll be successful as well, but we need to help them make successful. Now, we have a whole set of programs around it, with both in terms of business development. We have a program called Activate, where startups, as they qualify for, they get $100,000 in credit, they get business support, they get support from technologies, get support from partners. And so we continuously work with all players in the startup community to make sure that they're really successful. And also work with quite a few of the VC companies to make sure that we sort of often bring all of their CTOs together. So for example, on Monday I met with all the CTOs from Atomico. And so they've all come together and sort of their shared learnings and lessons there, that we can try to help them become successful.
No, and I mean, and you're an awesome partner for the VC community, right? Because at the end of the day, you're bringing down costs of scaling. You're like this expertise in scaling partner for all these companies, reducing the capex, and of course, that's a huge help for ourselves, no? And it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If this whole ecosystem, like a true ecosystem, is working well and feeding off each other, well, it's success for everyone. So I think that's a real fresh approach, I guess, where you're looking at not squeezing every client, but understanding their principles of success, and their success will be your success. So it looks like an absolute partnership model, I guess. Just to shift slightly, Werner, I'd love to you're so experienced, right? And you're so many years in this space, and you're looking at so many different types of technologies and opportunities out there, working with wide global networks of startup companies and what they're building. Where do you see this going? Do you think it's job well done? Do you think we're just starting out? How much more is there to do in terms of the opportunity within cloud computing? Now it's kind of more standardized. People are more familiar. Larger, more traditional corporates are starting to shift in.
So let's talk about the stuff that I'm really excited about, of that new stuff that's happening. I think mostly driven by the capabilities of cloud computing. What we're seeing is that forever, your computer interfaces or the interfaces to your applications were driven by the capabilities of the computer itself. A screen, a keyboard, a mouse, maybe your finger. Yeah, in essence, your cell phone isn't that different from the computers, from your laptop, because you do exactly the same thing. You type in. And so all of these systems have been built with a computer-centric interface. Yet the way that we like to interact with each other is through human-centric interfaces. We talk here. This is not a Slack channel where we're chatting. Yeah? And so what we'll see is that we'll see more natural interfaces coming to our digital systems. Voice, I think, is going to play a major important role in that. This is driven by capabilities that are now possible in the cloud. With something called GPGPUs, so general purpose GPUs, at scale available, very powerful NVIDIA boards, for example, combined with deep learning capabilities from platforms such as MXNet and Caffe and TensorFlow, that we now can process voice and other complex data streams at scale in real time that we could never do before. And so doing automatic speech recognition, natural language understanding, text-to-speech, all in real time is now possible. And so what you see is that we can now start to develop new interfaces to our digital systems that we couldn't do before. Yeah, if you're a young mother with a sick kid on your arm, you don't want to go to WebMD and fill out a form. Yeah? You prefer to scream to it. And so where interfaces are becoming natural interfaces. If we see the success of the Echo, but they're not necessarily, the Echo by itself is just an example device. The Alexa voice service, which sits behind it, is a cloud-based service. Yeah? People have extended that with 22,000 different skills. And also the individual components that sit in there, automatic speech recognition, natural language understanding, sit separate also in an AWS service called Lex, and Polly is the one that can speak back to customers. And you see that a whole revolution is happening because suddenly digital systems are becoming more accessible for everybody else to use. Yeah, for example, elderly people, if you've ever given an iPad to your grandmother, the only thing that she does is click that Skype button. Yeah? And so, however, if you could talk to the device, that will be something very different. Young kids that can't type yet have a natural way of interaction with digital systems.
Yeah.
Or in countries and places around the world where computers and maybe even cell phones are not readily available. We have a great AWS customer outside of Manila called the International Rice Research Institute. These guys know everything about rice, growing rice. There's 70,000 strands of rice in their freezer. And so they built a digital system to advise farmers about how much fertilizer to buy and when to apply it. These are small farmers. Built it as a web-based system, nobody used it. Why? Because none of these farmers have a computer at home or in the village. And they don't have a cell phone, they don't have a smartphone, maybe they have an old Nokia. And that's as far as it goes. Or maybe one phone in the village. So what they did is they put a voice system on top of this. Now farmers can call in from the village phone, to describe their patch of land in language. Machine learning goes off, comes back with an answer with how much fertilizer to buy and when to apply it. Yeah? Reduces the amount of fertilizer, by the way, by 90% and doubles crop yield, because none of these have ever been educated about it. But the success of this digital system is voice. And a natural human-centric interface to digital systems. Yeah. So I think some of the things that I'm most excited about is not only how to build these interfaces, but how are we going to build our backends differently to support, for example, conversations, instead of just what we used to do in the past, where voice was a sort of a command system, hands-free, that we were annoyed that we weren't allowed to use our cell phones while we were driving. But now we see integration of these voice here coming back into everything. Sonos integrates Alexa into his systems. GE puts it in their refrigerators, so you can talk to your refrigerator. Yeah, and so you will see that the whole environment where we are in is going to become active. Yeah, and so not only from an input point of view, not only voice, but other things. If you're a smart home user or an smart energy user, if you have to look at a graph on your phone, that doesn't really change behavior. Yeah. However, if you have a clock on the wall that goes from red to green or from green to red, if you're not meeting your goals, that changes behavior. Yeah. And so all these new interfaces that we're going to get to our digital systems, I think, is something that really excites me.
Sure, and it's a very simple thing, right? It's incredible to see this technology is now ready to go. Yeah. And on a final note, Werner, I'd love to understand how you're thinking about on that layer on top of that technology, taking it to the next level in terms of artificial intelligence, right? Yeah. So not only is it understanding what you're saying, it's actually able to bring together logic, and give you a correct answer, let's say.
I'm less of the science fiction side of things. Yeah, I think, first of all, we've been doing what we these days is called artificial intelligence for the past 20 years. If you're an Amazon customer, you've been continuously exposed to artificial intelligence, whether it is similarities, whether it's recommendations, whether it's we use it for inventory level setting, for price setting. We sit on billions of orders, so you might make use of the orders from the past in machine learning to make predictions of if a new order is coming in, if that is a fraudulent order or not, what the likelihood is of that. So machine learning is something that we've really been doing for the past 20 years already. That's just being smart with data that you already have to kind of make predictions about the future. And instead of coding an algorithm, you allow the machine learning systems to sort of find patterns in there. And that's all that it is. Yep. Yeah? And really important, by the way, Netflix, the guys at Netflix say that 70% of the movies watched on Netflix are driven by their recommendations. Basically, everybody goes sit in front of the TV and let Netflix tell you what you should be watching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah? You're not really making your choices
so
anymore. It's nice.
The other thing that happened, I think, in the past 3-4 years in cloud is that the ability to do a subsection of machine learning called deep learning at much higher scale, such that you can do complex things like audio and video processing, and all these other processings that you could not do years before. And so we'll see the integration of, for example, video and audio and voice into all the systems that we're building much more easily. The Amazon Go store, for example, where people can just walk in, take things off the shelf, put it in their bag, and walk out again. Without that they have to check out and automatically get charged, is all driven by deep learning capabilities that we can now do on the cloud.
Yeah, amazing, and an absolute different way of doing things and a new way of engaging and communicating. Werner, I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for being with us here today. It's wonderful to get an insight into the great mind that is building these solutions. And thank you so much for supporting the entrepreneurial community here and everywhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Folks, thank you. Big round of applause. Thanks, Werner.